Welcome back, everyone, to Middays, Hour 2 of the program, SuperTalk Mississippi. We are back in the Element Wealth Studios. Joining us now, calling in, Carl Szabo, Vice President and General Counsel of NetChoice. Carl, welcome to Middays.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So we wanted to have you on to talk about the Open App Markets Act. Tell us a little bit about this legislation and why you're concerned about it.
Yeah, the Open App Markets Act, or so-called Open App Markets Act, is anything but. Basically, this is a bill that is being fast-tracked through Congress that will force apps to basically take on any payment processor, take on lots of other problems, including cybersecurity exemptions, and completely ignore the impact to actual end users and what's best for customers. What it's essentially doing is trying to break apart the Google and App stores. And while some of us may think, oh, that's a great idea, one of the unintended consequences of the legislation is essentially that today parents can control when their kids do in-app purchases. Mm-hmm. You will lose that control. One of the other things that it will do is it will empower potential cyber criminals to gain access to our files. We don't want to do that. And the Republican proponents are saying this will enable more conservative speech on the app stores, whether it's Apple or Google. But by the same token, we got to remember who's the main sponsor of this bill. It's Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who's saying the exact opposite. She's saying this will allow Apple and Google to do more censorship of their app stores. So what we're seeing is a bill that's had no hearing. It's had no debate on the floor of the Senate. And essentially, they're trying to ram this through at the 11th hour. And whenever Congress tries to ram something through, it's always a bad idea for Americans.
No doubt about it. Typically, so I'm looking at the legislation itself. Typically, these things are so long. There's so much language in it. Nobody in Congress is reading this stuff. Whoever the staffers are and the wonks that put this together, without even analyzing it in detail here, I could pretty much bet that, as you said, it is jam-packed with all sorts of language and provisions that does way more than even what it purports to do.
Yeah, one of the things that I found, keep in mind, I've been in D.C. basically my whole life, so don't hold that against me. But if you got a great idea, you want to shout it from the rooftops. You want to celebrate it. You want to tell everybody about it. You want to have as many hearings as you can on it, because then people get to see what you're doing, and you get to go home and tell your constituents, look at all the great work I'm doing. This bill is the exact opposite. Nobody's really talking about it. No hearings are being held on it. No press is being done on that. And you have to ask why. What are they hiding? Why isn't this going through regular order? Why isn't this given the necessary sunshine that laws need to take? And basically, it's because it's a bad deal for somebody. At the end of the day, it's being pushed by a couple of giant corporations, Spotify and Epic Games, because they don't like having to pay a service fee to Apple or Google.
Right.
That's what it is at the end of the day.
Right.
And those service fees go to help subsidize the cost of our devices, which are already expensive. So as much as I like Spotify, as much as I like Epic Games, I don't think the taxpayers need to start giving them more money, which is essentially what this legislation does.
Yeah. You're exactly right. What I recall is the game makers, that they were the main ones because they wanted to be able to use their own payment processing feature and not have to pay Apple the fee for using theirs. But I think what gets lost in that discussion, Carl, is that, let's face it, without Apple and Google's platform, there is no app market. You don't have access to the hundreds of millions, billions of users, essentially, that use the platform to buy what you're selling.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Edgewater Mall, right? Somebody builds the mall, they build the roads, they pay for the infrastructure, and they basically should be allowed to make money on their creation. And what you're seeing is Spotify and Epic Games are like, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. let's remember, Spotify wouldn't be Spotify but for
exactly
the iPhone and the Android phone. And so basically they got rich off these platforms, and now that they got rich, they want to stop paying.
Exactly. I completely agree. When you look at the economy, essentially I'm calling it a digital economy, an app economy that wasn't even in our vernacular a short few years ago. And now it's not only is it huge, it's a fast and easy and convenient route to market with whatever it is you're selling. In one case, it's music subscriptions. In the other case, it's games of those two companies. Seems like you'd be more than willing to pay a little bit for the convenience and just the opportunity there. But you're right. They've all gotten extremely wealthy from utilization of these inventions by these companies. Why does the government, Carl, think they need to interfere here?
Unfortunately, I hate to say it, this is crony capitalism.
Yeah.
This is where Spotify and Epic Games go up to a bunch of lawmakers and say, can you pass this bill for us? And I think, unfortunately, some of the lawmakers have good intentions and have been misguided. Others have been kind of railroaded by these two corporations. Mm-hmm. And it's a bad deal for Americans. And one last point is these businesses, if they don't want to use Apple's payment processing, if they don't want to pay a service fee, they can do exactly what Netflix does today. And Netflix says you cannot sign up for their service through your iPhone or Android device. You do not use the Apple or Google stores for your payments.
Okay.
You do it straight to Netflix. So Apple and Google don't get a nickel from Netflix.
Yeah.
Spotify, Epic Games, if they don't like what Apple or Google are doing, they can just say, give us money on our website.
Yeah. Just circumvent it altogether. It makes sense. I mean, it just seems to me like as a private company, Apple and Google have the right to charge for those services and to restrict the platform in that way. It's their platform. It's their invention. It's their creation. It just always seems like the government thinks they should get involved under some crazy pretense that this will make things more fair. Is it also true that there's some Republicans on board with this as well? Marsha Blackburn comes to mind. Has she signed on to this legislation?
Yeah, and I respect Senator Blackburn. I respect her back when she was over in the House. She signed on to this, and look, she's coming at this from a worried about two players in the market. I get that. It's a concern. It's something that I kind of disagree with on a fundamental level, but it's a legitimate concern. She's coming from it with true intention. What then concerns me is the other co-sponsors on the Dem side.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, you've got Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, who is trying to use antitrust as a launch pad for her 2024 presidential bid. And that's where it concerns me, because you've seen a lot of groups on the conservative side come out against this legislation because of the way it could potentially be weaponized against conservative apps, under the guise of security, under the guise of safety, which are two provisions that are in this bill. So, once again, if this is a great idea, let's put it through regular order. Let's have robust hearings, discussions, debates. And if it's a great idea, it'll fly through Congress. But if it's not a great idea, then we got to really wake up when Congress is trying to do something at the 11th hour right before Christmas.
Gosh, I hope. You don't think they would try to insert some of this in continuing resolution or omnibus budget bill as they're kind of under the gun to get something done there, do you?
That's actually one of the things that we are watching for. We're in lots of discussion. Anytime you've got an omnibus piece of legislation, it becomes a Christmas tree.
Yeah. Exactly.
Where everyone's trying to hang their bills that they can't get through Congress onto this Christmas tree.
Yep.
But if they get this through, for Americans, at the bottom of that Christmas tree is a giant lump of coal in the form of loss of security, loss of control, and more government oversight over our smartphones.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be keeping up with it, and we appreciate you, Carl, for coming on Middays and breaking it down for us. Carl Szabo, Vice President and General Counsel of NetChoice, has been our guest. I'm sure we'll talk to you some more about that. Appreciate you coming on, Carl.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Middays is stepping aside for a break right here, and we're coming back on the other side.